Hello, my name is Zanalet, and I am so excited to be starting this series. I have decided to read the Bible in its entirety. I guess this is going to be one of my New Year's resolutions. Um, I want to read the Bible because I'm really interested in getting a greater understanding of the way history is told. Through that perspective, I'm really interested in learning more about Jesus' story and Mary, the Mother Mary, for my own selfish reasons. And yes, so I'm going to be reading the Bible, I guess chapter by chapter. I'm not sure how you would, I would guess chapter by chapter, beginning with the Old Testament Genesis. I'll be reading the King James version, but I'm also listening to an audiobook that's also the King James version, but there is a few differences in the language that's used. So yes, but I thought that I would make a little series on my YouTube channel and just experience this book with other people who are also reading it. And we can talk about it, and I'm just going to talk about what I notice in every chapter, what's interesting to me, and just a conversation. So I do want to begin by saying that I am not Christian, and I was raised in the Christian religion. My family is Christian, most of my family. I went to Catholic school until high school, and I did have Christian beliefs for most of my life up until maybe 18, I would say, is when I've definitively stopped associating myself with religion at all, but Christianity especially, and just kind of moved from non-denominational into being spiritual, but not being religious. And so I am bringing that specific perspective to this reading and to the conversations that I'm going to be having here. I am always respectful of everybody's beliefs as long as they are not derogatory and oppressive and violent. But as long as, it's a respectful conversation, I will remain respectful. And I'm not here to be aggressive and to invalidate anybody's personal belief systems. I'm very open-minded when it comes to spirituality and what can exist and what does exist. And I just think that the universe is so vast. So to say that there's only one correct way of understanding all of life and all of existence, I just think it's a very limited perspective. So I'm very open-minded, which is why I'm excited to read the Bible, because it is a hugely impactful book when it comes to human history, and it's been around for so long, and I think all of the conversations that circulate it are very interesting, and I just want to add my own perspective as somebody who is not an atheist. I do believe in a higher source. I believe in spirit. I believe in angels and ancestors and spirit guides, the spirit world. I believe in a lot of things. I believe in gods and goddesses. And so I'm interested to have this conversation, and I want to do it in a way that comes from a place of love and genuine curiosity and a desire to learn more. I will say that I believe that the Mother Mary, Jesus' mother, is one of my spirit guides, which I feel strange kind of saying on the internet because, but I do believe that. I've just had a lot of experiences that make me think that. And so while I'm not sure about the way that her story is told and Jesus' story is told and the perspective of God and all of these things are told through the Bible, I do think it would be interesting and probably beneficial for me to learn more about, these things that I kind of had my hand in my life, my ancestry dipped into just through association, through history, through slavery. Christianity and that whole faith and religion is deeply embedded into my culture as a Caribbean person, even as a South African person, just as a Black person, as a young person today, and in the life that I've grown up in, religion has always been a factor. So yes, that was just my little get to know me, reason why I'm doing all of this, and just a few disclaimers. I'd also say that I am queer, so that'll be obvious as I go into certain discussions as we get into this book. But honestly, I'm trying to not have many expectations and not be super judgmental because I don't know what the book is going to say. I've never read it in its entirety. I've read the creation story and Cain and Abel's story and maybe a few others here and there, but I really don't remember much, and a lot of what I know is just cultural and societal, and so I am excited to read the book. So I took some notes, and I just have things that I want to talk about in my head, but where we're going to be starting today is with the Old Testament, with the book of Moses, and with the Genesis story, and as well as Adam and Eve's story, where they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's just how I know how to define it. I don't remember the chapter name, but yes. So, I did make a little kind of guide on how I wanted to break down this discussion, but I guess I'll just start with my overall feelings. So I'm listening to the audiobook as well as reading the book and taking notes, the Bible book. I'm reading the King James Version. There's translations. There's probably going to be misunderstandings and miscommunications, language differences that change the meaning. So all of that is just, out of my control. And so I'm just going based off of what I know. And I'm going in the order that the Bible proceeds. So I know that there are missing books. I know that there's a lot of things that might come up later on that have to do with what happens right then and there. But I can only go off of what I know. So we're taking it chapter by chapter. Bear with me if there's anything that you feel like is wrong. I don't know what to tell you. That's what the audiobook said, and that's what the Bible said, the one that I have. So, yeah. Okay, so how I felt about it overall. The Genesis story. Genesis has always been my favorite, and reading it the second time around, I still enjoyed, following the steps of creation, going day by day that God follows, but there were things that made it difficult to look at it and be like, at peace about the creation of life. One of those things was the use of the masculine so often, and male pronouns, he, him, his, and I thought that it was irritating at some points, just, because I would like feminine energy to be present in all conversations around the creation of life. It just does make sense. Not because only women create life and anything like that. I don't even really believe in gender, but just because masculine energy isn't the only thing that exists. And so when you're talking about the creation story, to only use he and him, but then also, and only use words like seed, it's just very male dominant, and it gives a very skewed perspective about, who the creators are of life, and why are there even, people who are deemed the creators, because that just gives power. But I think that it's a very limited perspective, and so that was hard to ignore. And something that was really interesting to me was was God's continuous saying of "this is good," and God saw that it was good, or this is good. I thought that was really interesting because it made me wonder, can God create bad? And, why did God need to confirm that things were good, things were okay? That was something that happened a lot with all of the creations for the first few days, if I'm remembering correctly. And I couldn't help but wonder and be like, well, of course it's good. It's created by God. And this is where my assumptions of, context that I already know about and understanding that God is all-knowing, what is it? Omnipresent? I don't know. God is all-knowing, all-powerful, can do all, and God is good. And so to have God constantly confirming that this is good made me wonder if there was ever a potential for God to create something that was not good, that was bad, that was wrong. It also quite early on establishes that God, that the difference between good and bad, and it kind of falls, not directly, but sort of in line with light and darkness, night and day. There's a lot of duality, which also connects to male and female. So we see duality established right at the very beginning. And there isn't really even a space to offer anything more beyond that. Even in the very, very beginning, when it's talking about just what the earth was like before God came and moved the darkness and started creating things, they say that the earth was, I think it was said, without form and void. There was only water and darkness. So there was just darkness over the land, I guess, and then there was the deep. And the deep was water. And so that was something that was interesting to me as well, because when you think about how we look at water today versus how we look at land, or just like the earth versus the ocean is always given feminine energy, right? We always name like different tsunamis and hurricanes, and anything about that is always associated with femininity and is always given a woman's name and things like that. And so I thought that was interesting, that that immediately there is that separation, and that there is this essence of, or this idea of two, only two. It's very constricting, and it establishes a binary that, you know, you would think make things more equal, because it's, everything is balanced, there's always two. But I would say that it leaves a lot of room for there to just be a power, somebody at the top and somebody at the bottom, because there is no collective thought. It's just two people. So one wins, one loses. One side wins, one is the loser. One is stronger, more powerful, one is the lesser. And so that was just something that I noticed. And I think that in my personal beliefs, I don't believe that the Bible was written by God. I think that the Bible was written by men. And I'm not even quite sure if I believe that, well, you know what? Who am I to say if, those men or people who wrote the Bible channeled directly from God? I really don't know. I really don't know. But I find it difficult to believe that even the Spirit, which I believed in as a child when I was heavily Christian, wrote the Bible. I find it really hard to believe that that Spirit that I believed in was talking to these people and saying these things, just because of the language around it. There's a lot of inconsistencies to me. And so, yeah, that was just, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place in the beginning. But that was something that I noticed. I wanted to ask why water existed just naturally, because God didn't have to create anything. God didn't have to create water. Water was already there. So I wonder, you know what? I just had a thought, because like I just said, water was already there. Water is a universal symbol of life, not just for human beings, but just when it comes to Earth. You think of water and you think of Earth. And when we think about climate change now and looking for other places for human beings to live, because the planet is hurt, Earth is hurt, and we need to heal her, but power and money makes things difficult. One of the main things that we hear a lot of people talking about, powerful people, and also scientists and things like that, people like that, talk about, is looking for water and seeing if there are different planets that have water, because that is something that is a sign that shows that human beings can exist elsewhere and that life exists elsewhere. So water is a sign of life. And I thought that it was interesting that water existed at the very beginning, or before the beginning, because water was there before God did anything, which kind of feels like saying that life was there before God did anything. And so I would wonder if it's not God that created life, but rather God who initiated life into movement, initiated life out of stillness, or out of like kind of like a sleeping rest state, a death state almost. I thought that was interesting. And especially with the pronouns that are often attributed to God, which are he, him, which is the masculine. And when you think of the masculine, you think of production, working things, moving things, migrating, colonialism. Not always colonialism, just like migrating, building. You think of masculine and you think of expansion and things like that. I think that it would make sense that they chose to tell this story in the way that, life in its essence, which if it is associated with water, and water is associated with femininity and feminine energy. And I would like to try and separate feminine and masculine as much as we can from gender. I know that's hard, but I'm going to try and talk about it in a way that does not include the conversation around gender just right now, because it's just a lot. But anyways, if we understand water as feminine energy, and then understand life as feminine energy, but as God or spirit as the masculine energy, which comes in and kind of moves things about and creates, just creates movement that begins life to spur off into all of these other creations. And then it is kind of like a co-working, a co-creation between life and God, feminine energy and God, or feminine energy and masculine energy. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So I'm somebody who is really fascinated by the divine feminine and feminine energy in general. You can probably tell by me spending however long just talking about that in the beginning. But I also kind of tend to associate darkness and death with feminine energy as well. And that might just be because, the moon and the nighttime and the ocean and depth is often attributed to feminine energy. And so I naturally am just, or I don't know if that's nature or nurture, through the concepts that I've learned and the bubble that I've been raised within, or I raised myself within, because that wasn't always my natural or my childhood education. But yeah, what I've learned through my own spiritual journey, that's kind of what I associate with. And so it's interesting to see that feminine energy and divine feminine energy, you could say, has always been there and always been present. And it goes beyond just the creation of the earth, because in the beginning, I know that this is a creation story for the human context of what it was like to be life on earth, but it sounds like at the same time, and what I think is generally understood is that at the same time God was also creating the universe, because they talk about, or these writers, they write about in the Bible in the very beginning the creation of the sun and the stars and the moon as well, the greater light, which is the sun, and the lesser light, which I would imagine is the moon, and also the stars, even like the greater lesser. But I understand what it meant. I understand what it means. But yeah, so this was also talking about the creation of the universe. And so you see this co-creative act between God and energy, life force energy. And so I just thought that was interesting, because it made me think that, it really is not just God. In my perspective, from what I was understanding, it did not sound like it was just God out there all alone. It just sounded as though it was God coming into a space and kind of doing this little dance with life to expand the universe, to expand the understanding of what can be and what can exist, what it means to exist, what it means to move and grow and expand. And so it was this co-creative act. And I think that is super, super interesting. And I would like to see it that way rather than just God acting solely alone, because I would wonder, there's always the question of, well, then where does God come from? And what pushes God to act? What pushes God to create? where does God get anything to create from? There is something that is constantly in collaboration with. Nothing exists on its own. We see that through the entirety of life and the entirety of our understanding of the universe. Nothing exists on its own. Nothing is created on its own. Nobody gets to where they are in life on their own. And nobody is just solely themselves. There's also your past. There is also, the energy of others, the contributions of others, other people's thoughts and opinions and perspectives which raise you, and your past, if you believe in past lives, your past life and that energy that carries you and pushes you forward into this life, and the things that you have to unlearn that you're like, where did I even get these thoughts from? So nothing is done alone. And so I just thought that the beginning of the Genesis story, not beginning with just God alone in a vast darkness or in a nothingness, but rather there was something, and it was darkness that there was, and it was void. Oh no. Okay, sorry. I just thought that my computer just shut down. I was really scared. Anyways, yeah, it was not nothing that was there, or even you could characterize nothingness as something. There was something. God was co-creating with something. That was just what I was trying to get across, and I just thought that concept was very interesting, because then you can almost understand the root of divine feminine energy, which is this like bursting possibility and this capability to create everything from nothing, and this stillness and this power that comes with just being, and being so much that it is nothing at all until something else comes in and you give permission to just, move it, spread it out, and then unleash, and suddenly here it comes bursting out, the craziest possibilities, the most creative imaginations from this darkness and from this void. And I really love that interpretation that I'm building up in my mind just from, this original context, because it makes so much sense to me. And I think that it gives so much more value and strength and purpose to divine feminine energy, and to the act of stillness, and to the act of and to the existence of darkness. We often have darkness characterized as bad and evil and difficult and uncomfortable, and maybe it is uncomfortable sometimes, and maybe it can be difficult, but I think that it moves darkness beyond the understanding that we've had, due to like very simplified stories about light and dark, good and bad, and even race, and conversations we have around white supremacy and blackness, black people, dark people around the world, people who are just not white people, and the power structures that have been created from that. There's a lot that comes with lightness and darkness, and I think that you could argue that a lot of it can begin from this story, the story of Genesis, and the stories that are told in the Bible, and the language that is associated with that, and reading it this time around, and with my own perspective around feminine energy, and wanting to honor the goddesses that work and do so much for life, and the feminine energy that is so precious and so important, always, but especially now as we look at the earth and the changes that we're all going through, and so many conversations around women and consent, and balancing the masculine and the feminine, and bringing healing to toxic masculinity, and understanding that we all have, both energies of femininity and masculinity, and trying to separate that from gender. It's also complicated, and I think that this beginning kind of really explores the complexity of energies of darkness and light. I guess is what I'm trying to say, and show that it's not just this duality. We put these two terms on it, dark and light, feminine and masculine, but really there's so much more within that, And maybe it's just so that we can fully understand it that we give it these simple terms and we just pick two because that's what our brains can focus on. And that's okay. But there is so much more beyond that. It's so complex. There's so much more behind the curtain. And I think that that is a beautiful image, just beginning with God and darkness, which I consider feminine energy in this context. So yeah. So another thing that I noticed in the very beginning is that there's a part where it says God's Spirit. I think I should go grab it. Can I go grab it? I'm not going to stop this. I'm just going to grab the book, the Bible, the Holy Bible. This is my father's. And I'm just going to see where it says it. Because it says something about God's Spirit, and it made me think that, oh, here it is. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Also, doesn't that sound kind of romantic? So I was just looking, so I was just reading that, and first, it made me think that God has a spirit of their own, because it was the Spirit of God. If it was just God, I feel like it would have been God moved upon the face of the waters. But it sounded like it was God's essence, God's energy, God's spirit, God's soul, which moved upon the face of the waters. And thinking about the waters as just another energy form, something representing darkness and depth, something I would say akin to God and that type of power. The waters representing life, representing the possibility, representing creative energy, fertility, vibrancy, aliveness, the Spirit of God moving upon that, and just the face, not the waters. It could have been, and God moved upon the waters, but it was, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Not just all of the depths yet, but just the face of the waters. And so we see these two separate parts of these energies interacting. We see the Spirit of God interacting with the face of the waters, the face of life. I would say the Spirit of life. And it was almost like this embrace, this kiss. Kind of like, yeah, the kiss of onto life, the breathing into the nostrils, like how God breathes into Adam's nostrils later on in that other story. Yeah, I just thought that was romantic, but I also thought about, wow, the Spirit of God. So what is that? What is God's Spirit versus God? So then what else is there to God beyond God's Spirit? Because to separate means that there is a distinction between the two. There is something else more beyond God than just their spirit. I'm using they, them pronouns for God because everybody says that God doesn't have a gender. So I'm going to follow that. Though in the Bible, we do see he a lot. Though, yeah, we do see he a lot and his. But I'm just going to use they, them. So anyways, I thought that was really romantic. I thought that was romantic, and I thought that was super interesting, and I wanted to know more about who God was beyond God's Spirit. And I wanted to understand what other aspects of God that there were. I wanted to understand what other aspects of life that there were beyond life's spirit, because it makes everything so much more alive and so much more complex. And it furthers my discussion about that duality just is not everything. It's not just two, it's not just duality. That's a super oversimplification, and there's got to be much, much more. And it's probably just so vast and so difficult to understand. But is it? Because we look at ourselves, and I believe that we all have spirits, we all have souls, but we are also more than our spirit. Our spirit can exist after death into the spirit world, but our spirit in the spirit world is not us in this specific reality. This is an incarnation in the human experience. I am me, but after I pass on and my spirit continues into another life, that is not really, that's me, but that's not me. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that we are more than our spirits, and our spirits are an aspect of us and inform a lot of who we are, but not everything. So I just wondered what else there was to God, and that was something that came forth as I was rereading, and I just thought it was also romantic to see the interaction between the Spirit of God and the face of the waters. So yeah. Moving on from there, something that kept coming up was God repeating that things are good, and almost confirming to, it seemed like confirming to themselves that things are good, because it was constantly repeated. This is good, and God saw that it was good. And the need to make sure that things are good, things are okay. So it made clear that there was something that God did not want to create, right? Because God assuring and confirming that things are good means that there is an opposite to that. There is another side to that. There are multiple other things that could be. Good is not the only existence. Good isn't even great, right? So things are good. There is a specific intention that God had in mind, and they needed to assure that that is what was created every single time, with every major foundational creation, when it came to the earth and the heavens or the universe. And so I wondered what that intention was, and what were the other possibilities of what could happen. And if something wasn't good, would God fix it, or would it just be? Because I did wonder if there was a possibility for God to, is there restarting? Is there erasing and starting over? Is there, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's just get rid of that. Is there even a possibility to get rid of something once it's been created? Because this is the creation of the universe. So when something exists, it exists. Even if just the thought or the past of it existing means that it exists, and that energy cannot disappear, right? Because energy doesn't disappear. The energy doesn't die and go away, or at least from my understanding of that. So I wondered. I was just wondering, what would not be good? What was God's intention? What did God want when they began to work with life, work with this other energy force to expand and to create? What was the intention, and what could have possibly gone wrong? Something that I also was wondering, and this is coming from outside context, is wondering about what was happening before the creation of the universe. Because the creation of the universe, does that also signify the creation of the spirit world and all other spiritual beings, like angels? Angels. Because I don't believe in the Christian faith, which this Bible belongs to, I believe, believes in other gods and goddesses. I don't think so. So it would just be God. But there are angels. So were there angels, up there being ooh, what's God doing? That's something that came to mind. I was just wondering if God was just out here just deciding that they wanted to create this whole universe system, blah, blah, blah. And the angels were oh, okay, cool. Because if so, what were they doing before? What was happening before that? Because was this creation of the universe the creation of God? Was God just sitting around before then? Doing what? Because if God was sitting around thinking, then they were doing something. So things were being created, because everything from God is just a thought, right? So it was the idea, oh, let me create this. And it's created because everything is a thought. Everything is an idea. So was the genesis of Earth and the universe also the genesis of God? Or no, and it wasn't. because God had to, I'm unpacking, because it couldn't have been, because if the genesis of the earth and the universe was the genesis of God, then, like, we would have had to have seen, no, that just doesn't make sense, does it? So God existed long before. There would have needed to be a good enough amount of time between God springing from wherever, whatever, or just always being, and the earth and the universe, the creation of the earth and the universe. Long enough that I would imagine there were thoughts of creation before the thought of creating the universe. There must have been other things to occupy God's mind, or else wouldn't it have just been, and there was God, and then there was the creation of the universe? Like, it wouldn't have been, there would be no space between that, but it feels like there's space between that. So what was happening? What was happening before the creation of the universe I guess is what I'm asking. What was the spirit world doing? Were there other universes? Because I do believe in multiple universes, which is an interesting idea and a very difficult idea to wrap my head around, because that's a lot. That's huge. That's massive energy to imagine, not only another Earth or a parallel Earth, blah, 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 but another universe, another star system, all these other planets, all these other beings. It's so exciting. It's very exciting to me. But there is so much left, to be like, what's going on before Genesis. I just want to know what was happening. And I imagine that there's other books. I've heard that there are other books. So I guess I'll have to read on, or read ahead, or read outside of this one source to figure that out. But from this story, I am very interested. Yeah. So that was something that I was thinking about. But yeah, I was thinking about good. What is goodness? So we see good be defined actually just from this story. We see good defined because and God saw the light and that it was good. So what about the light is good? And God divided the light from the darkness. So in dividing the light from the darkness, was God dividing good from something, or are both good in this context? Right? Because would God allow something that wasn't good to exist in that same space on earth and in the universe? Or was God making it so that there was always an opposite, or always not just one single opposite, but a multitude of other existences beyond good, right? Because there's division, there's separation. God separates the dry land from the seas, from the ocean, and he sees that it's good. So, while God is establishing what's good, is God also making the effort to understand what will parallel that, or what will be the opposite to that? Or is that just something that God is not thinking about? Because everything has to be informed by something else. Light is informed by darkness. There was darkness first. There was that energy, I believe, divine feminine energy of life in its, in its core sense, which is this still vibrating stillness. I know that doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. That this darkness, this incredible depth, and yet this void, this nothingness, but this everythingness, which is darkness, which is feminine energy, divine feminine energy, in like a very complex way. There is that, and then that informs all of this light which God is creating, or all of this movement of life and expansion which God is creating, co-creating. So I wondered if God was also paying attention to the opposites, to what was coming out on the back end to inform the creation of certain things, or not, Because you could argue that with the act of moving things, of pushing movement into life and pushing expansion and creation and beginning to, expand, move, create, there had to be this understanding that there would be like another ending. Does that make sense? Because God is not going to go on creating forever. So once God like stopped the creation, the constant like, really hands-on creation, there must have been an understanding that things were going to end eventually, because God's hands were no longer in the creative force. If that makes sense. Things aren't going to go on eternally unless there was the assumption of immortality. And you can see that in the story up until Eve eats the apple. The serpent shows up and Eve eats the apple. There is this understanding, or almost this assumption, that things were going to just be eternal, kind of sort of like God, because everything was made in God's image and informed by God's understandings. And so they had to be eternal. Right? But, yeah. And another thing I noticed, God never looked at the darkness and saw that it was good. And potentially, that might be because God did not have the thought or the right to make a judgment upon darkness. And I would maybe argue because darkness is the goddess. And so there is no judgment that God could have upon the goddess, because they are equals. Or that energy is like goddess energy. Same way light might be godlike energy. Darkness is goddess-like energy, divine feminine energy. And so it is the same thing. So there is no judgment to be cast upon it. Right? That's what I think. That's what I'm getting. I'm sorry, I'm literally only on like the first page. Clearly this is gonna have to be broken up, because I'm not even getting to Adam and Eve yet. But I'm really like stuck upon that, because the very first line is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form, and void and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay, wait. Wait. Yeah, because God created the heaven and the earth. But there is a distinction between the earth and the waters and darkness. It was not in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth and the waters and the darkness. Because if darkness was something to be created, then that would have been mentioned, wouldn't it have been? But darkness existed on its own. And that's why I feel like darkness and all things associated with it are the act of the goddess, are the creations of the goddess, or that is just the goddess's energy. And it just lives in everything. Which is why God had to move upon it, because darkness does not move for anything. Darkness is the goddess. She sits and she allows. She receives. So if God comes in and is like, let's create a universe, then the darkness is like, okay. And the goddess is like, okay. But she does not have to move. She will not be moved. Just like God cannot be moved, from the understandings that I have of God from my childhood and all of that. God is immovable. Darkness is immovable, but penetrable and, co-creative, collaborative. I don't know, I'm just getting this whole energy around darkness and that being the goddess. But because we don't name the god, we don't name a goddess at all. I don't believe yet in the Bible. Maybe we will. Maybe I'll be wrong about that. And we don't really talk about this other energy akin to God. We don't really get to explore that, but I feel like that's there. I feel like that's there. Because in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The heaven. I kind of am understanding the heaven as the universe. Though I do understand that in this context, earth is kind of seen as the central point within outer space. And then there's heaven, and then I believe there's hell. But I'm seeing heaven as the universe. But before there was the heavens and there was the earth, there was what? There was God and something else. Something had to exist for God to create into space. Even just the existence of space, of room, that is the goddess energy. It encapsulates everything. It surrounds everything. Everything is within it. God is even within the goddess energy. It's almost like the womb. The womb of entirety. The womb of everythingness and of nothingness, darkness, the void is the goddess. Like, that is the goddess. And so it wasn't even a thought to mention, because I don't even know if God, everything that God thinks of, God creates, right? So if there isn't this mentioning of the goddess, it's because God could not create the goddess. The God exists in their own right. Gender doesn't exist. So the goddess, or that energy, that co-creative energy, exists in their own right, in its own right, and is so beyond needing to be informed by another energy. Like, she is the informing. She is the confirmation. Sorry, they are the confirmation. That energy is the confirmation, the informing, the context, the space in which you are able to have a thought, to put out, Like, even the ability to have one of your thoughts just spew into something. There was something else before it, to hold it, There's something that held that. That's why I'm thinking of like a womb. I'm just like, that is an incredibly powerful and strong energy and image in my mind that I have right now. I know that I'm going so far off of what we're talking about right now, but I can't help it, because I'm just like, what is this other energy? Because there clearly is another energy. A very expansive, powerful, great energy that whoever were the people that wrote this Bible did not even think of mentioning. And it wasn't even, and it's not even a thing to whatever that energy is. There's no ego attached to that. There is no need to be mentioned and to be labeled as the goddess or, feminine energy, whatever it could be. There's no ego attached to that, because it is literally in everything. Because everything is informed by it. It is like literally the original context. Like, I don't know, the encasing. It is, I'm so intrigued. I'm super, super intrigued. And it makes sense that it would be associated with water, because water is formless, and water can take shape of everything. It can take the shape of anything. Water can hold light, and it can hold darkness. It is mutable the right word? Mutable, moldable, and yet so powerful and so strong, and constantly involved with life. So, yes. Yes. I'm just like, where... This is such an interesting idea to me, and I'm only on the first page, or the first 2 pages. But to be honest with you, I think I need to make another video talking about the rest of Genesis and the creation because I don't have the time, because it's already 49 minutes and 49 seconds, and I need to stop recording so I can upload this. So I'm going to cut this off here, and this is going to be about basically the first page of the Bible. And yes, and I am just wondering what this other energy is that is co-creating with God, because there must be another energy, at least one, if not multiple. If not, but I mean, because I believe that God is multiple energies in itself. Spirit is multiple energies. Like, there's never any just one thing. Everything is so expansive and, collaborative. Everything is a community. And so, yeah. Somebody needs to write a book on God and the surrounding energy of that and whatever is happening there, because that is so interesting to me. But I'm going to stop this because I want to take a break and come back to this another day. But this was a great start. I hope that if you're watching this, you enjoyed it. I am excited to get into the rest of the chapter because I had a lot to say about Adam and Eve and everything else, and ruling over, having dominion over all of life on earth, but I got distracted. I got carried away. So we'll get into that in the next video. And I'm gonna try and do these. Maybe I'll try and do them daily, if not daily, every other day, at least once a week. I'm going to try and finish the Holy Bible. It is beautifully written. This is the version, the King James Reference Bible. King James Version. And it was created by Zondervan. Published by Zondervan. Yes. So, have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this. Tell me what you think in the comments. If you have any thoughts around this surrounding energy that I'm trying to understand and put a name to. Yeah. And just try and please be respectful, be kind, be loving. If you're going to write something that's not great, maybe, think again. But yeah, just thanks for watching if you watched all of this, and tell me what you thought yourself. I'm really interested to know. But yeah, we'll be back with the rest of Genesis and the Adam and Eve story in the next video. So, goodbye.